Your METALWORKS Radiant AR-X panels ship in well-protected crates. To protect the panels, place on sawhorses with cardboard on top to protect the finish of your AR-X panels. During shipment, the 4 independent extrusions of your panel could shift just a little bit, resulting in racking. If necessary, lightly tap them back into place. This tool ships with your AR-X panels. You can order extra if you like. Notice the notch about 2 inches in from the end of the tool. This acts as a stop when inserting into the copper tubing. Prior to installing the AR-X panels, you'll need to curve your copper tubing upward for supply and return, as well as panel-to-panel connections. When bending or curving upward, shift your hand close to the end of the tubing while applying gentle, steady pressure to release the tubing from the extrusion's bosses or saddles. As the tubing releases, you can pull your hand back 6 to 8 inches as you curve your copper upward about 2 inches from the face of the panel. Before starting any copper connections, make sure you understand the AR-X panel is directional. There is a tongue on one side and a groove on the other. Make sure you rest the tongue side on your wall angle and plan your layout accordingly. Prior to installing your copper U's, make sure you prep by sanding and wire brushing both surfaces, then add your flux prior to inserting. On one end of the panel, we are inserting 2 copper U's. After applying flux, simply apply gentle pressure to ensure the copper has sufficient embedment in the opposing tubing. You can tap lightly with a rubber mallet if needed. On the opposite side of the panel, we are installing our copper interconnects that connect panel to panel. The same sanding, wire brush, and flux treatment is needed here as well. As you insert your interconnects, make sure they ultimately angle downward for easy future connection to the opposing panel in the plenum. Here you are only inserting with flux. You'll solder after connecting to its opposing panel in the plenum. Next, solder your U's that you previously prepped with sanding, brushing, and flux. Then wipe clean. Lightly tap your copper back into the extrusion saddles and your panel is ready for installation. Installation of AR-X panels is a 2-installer lift. Make sure to carry the panels vertically oriented. AR-X panels simply lay into the exposed T-grid system. Secure your panels with 3 12-gauge hanger wires in the middle and 1 on each end. There's 2 layers of fiberglass separating every 2 panels in your crate. Make sure to roll these up and save them, as you will ultimately lay these over your Radiant panels once installed. On this next panel, let's talk about the key things you need to do if the panel needs to be field cut. First, take your installed measurement, then mark the cut location on the face of your AR-X panel. To protect the finish on the face of your AR-X panel, it's a good idea to mask off the area that your metal cutting circular saw will glide over and be in contact with the face of the panel. You can file off any burrs left on your cut edge. After cutting the panel to length, we'll need to measure back 7 inches to mark where we need to cut our copper, then properly lift the copper from its bosses high enough for the saw to clear your cut locations without hitting the panel. The same dedicated metal cutting circular saw will work for your copper too. We need to remove the extruded cross brace on the back of your cut piece of panel that you just removed. We'll reinstall this to the portion of the panel that will be installed. Again, your 12-gauge hanger wires tie off to this cross brace. Since we cut the copper tubing, we need to deburr the inside with this deburring tool. Then, the same copper wire brushing, sanding, and flux prior to fitting a single copper U into place. Again, gentle pressure and a few taps from a rubber mallet help secure the U's in place. On the same end of this cut panel, there's a lot going on. We also need to install our copper supply lines, since this is the first panel in a series. They are intentionally left long for connecting to the water supply lines up in the plenum. With a single U and supply lines on this end, we can now solder these pieces together, then wipe clean. On the opposite end of this panel, all we have to do is lift our 4 copper lines and wire brush the insides prior to installing up in our grid. These open copper lines will hook up to the 360 interconnects previously installed on our first panel. Remember, each panel needs 3 taut hanger wires installed, one in the middle and then one on each end. Leaving the interconnects unsoldered makes the connection point much easier, since you are able to push and rotate the interconnects into position prior to the final soldering up in the plenum. Here's our 2 installed panels showing U's, interconnects, and supply lines, plus a field cut panel modification, all of which on a real project are distributed across the whole Radiant panel installation. Your insulation that you rolled up and saved from your packaging crate can now be laid over the installed AR-X Radiant panels. You'll need to cut as needed for fitting around wires, etc. This insulation serves to project radiant energy downward into the building's occupied space. Your installation is now complete.